Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Massive matchup. Bama heading on the road to play LSU in what feels like a legitimate college football playoff elimination game, right? You look at the team that wins this football game, driver's seat in terms of making the college football playoffs. The team that loses this football game, probably not making the college football playoffs. But I think more importantly, for both of these head coaches, Brian Kelly in year 3, Kalen DeBoer taking over Nick Saban year 1. This feels like a massive game for both of these head coaches. Now, both teams coming off a bye. I would expect to see, ideally, as a college football fan, the best version of both of these teams. Fired up to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, I think most importantly, let it fly in the comment section. I can see it getting rowdy in the comment section. I wouldn't want to have it any other way when we're talking this matchup. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's get into the biggest storyline I think we have in this football game. That is this LSU defense that is unquestionably better than what it was in 2023, which is not saying much, but it's clearly better under Blake Baker, going up against an Alabama offense that we've been banging the table. We want to see them run the football more, stick to the run game a little bit more. The two games where LSU has seen offenses that are dedicated to running the football, it was Texas A&M and South Carolina. Texas A&M ran the football for 245 yards. South Carolina ran the football for 243 yards. My big question is, does Kalen DeBoer in Alabama come into this matchup saying, we are going to not only just run the football, but be very diligent in sticking to the run game and kind of have a similar performance where a very similar quarterbacks too, right? Marcel Reed for Texas A&M, Lenore Sellers for South Carolina, Jalen Milroe for Alabama. They contest this LSU front seven in a lot of the same ways running the football. Do you feel like that's kind of the game we're going to get as Alabama heads on the road to play LSU?
And frankly, Brian Kelly's already said it. They don't do well against running quarterbacks. He pretty much said if he was going to play LSU, that's what he's going to do. And you got the best one in the game doing it. Jalen Milroe still, as much as he's probably not looked quite as good as he did early on in the season, especially in that first half against Georgia, he's still ultra dynamic with the ball in his hands. And I think you kind of said it, like, a lot of what Alabama's going to do is frankly going to come down to if their defense can play a little bit better and not get behind in this football game, but also if they can avoid taking penalties and negative plays, because those have been two issues that I think, again, Kalen DeBoer definitely knows they want to run the ball. I don't think it's him getting out of this rushing attack, if you will, but situationally, they've just gotten themselves into way too many positions where they can't run the ball. And frankly, that's probably going to be LSU's opportunity to stop this Alabama attack, is to be able to create negative plays and score a lot themselves.
Which they've been doing a really good job of. Now, you first talk about can LSU, you're probably right? Alabama has wanted to run the football, but has gotten in certain situations where they've gotten out of the run game because they're either down in the second half against Vanderbilt or taking a lot of negative plays. Dill, I think that's the best way to settle down Jalen Milroe. Like, let him go be an athlete. Like, at the end of the day, Jalen Milroe is one of, if not the best athletes on the football field. I think that's a really good way to settle him down in a football game, especially in this kind of environment. I think more importantly, like protecting your offensive line and pass protection. If you find yourself in second and third and long, this is not something I had on my bingo card. Dill, you look at this LSU defense, number 3 in the country, sacking the quarterback, 11.4% of dropbacks. We all know the right tackle, Elijah Pritchett, has struggled in a big way. This is going to be a hard environment for him to operate in pass pro. It's going to be loud. It's going to be hard to hear the snap count. You're dealing with one of the better edge rushers that we see in the country right now in Braden Swinson. Dill, one of the things I'm looking at, it's not only just the front four getting after Alabama, it's the pressure that Blake Baker's going to bring. Because when you've seen this Alabama offensive line struggle in pass pro, it's been really just the right tackle, Elijah Pritchett, but more importantly, just not picking up blitzes very effectively. And I think Blake Baker's going to test this Alabama offensive line to communicate when it's really loud in the crowd and pick it up the right way. That's kind of another storyline I'm looking at, is what do the negative plays look like for LSU's defense in this Alabama offense?
And frankly, to me, I think part of that negative play, it's going to be, can they give Jalen Milroe some different looks in terms of what he's reading? Because I thought a big issue Texas or LSU had against Texas A&M was they basically just had Marcel Reed reading the defensive end, and whether he crashed or stayed home was pretty much the basis of how they were attacking him. I wonder if they can try to confuse him a little bit and use a linebacker to maybe take Jalen Reed and just do something to kind of make that read a little bit more difficult. Because again, I looked at really, you watch that Texas A&M game, that was almost picture what an offense would want their offense to look like in that read option kind of look. I think you see a lot of new teams kind of recognizing it's really hard to just play that straight. And I wonder if Blake Baker, with 2 weeks now to prepare for this game, can give Jalen Milroe a bit of a different look and hopefully create some negative plays and a little bit more chaos at the mesh point that they just didn't have.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, I just think Blake Baker's too good of a defensive coordinator to get burned a third time with a mobile quarterback. In this case, you know it's going to be Jalen Milroe, and you've had 2 weeks to get it right. Like, you go back to that Texas A&M game, you probably prepped most of the time for Connor Wigman. Didn't really put a ton of prep in for Marcel Reed at quarterback, and you certainly saw them look really confused. Look, I trust Blake Baker. It's hard for me to see him come out and just look completely unprepared for this Alabama rushing attack. I think the last big storyline here is the deep ball, where we kind of know Alabama, Jalen Milroe is a passer. Like, when he's playing his best, he's pushing the ball down the field, hitting explosive plays. This LSU secondary has played much better football over the last couple of weeks than they were at the beginning of the year. This is going to be their test, though. Like, Texas A&M wasn't a team that was going to test you on the perimeter. Alabama pushed the ball down the field will be. What do the explosive play numbers look like in this football game? And can Alabama get back to hitting those explosive plays when they're Alabama and that Alabama offense is really humming?
And that's where I still look to Zy Alexander as the guy. Like, what can he do against Ryan Williams? Because you make no mistake, this offensive pass game for Alabama runs through Ryan Williams. I feel like I heard some criticism, like they're going to him too much. It's a little bit too much led by him. And he is their horse. He should be getting their ball.
He should be.
But
Yeah.
I think, again, you look at the way Zy Alexander's kind of come in and steadied this secondary down a little bit. I think he is their number one guy. Ashton Stamps has played better with Zy Alexander on the field, and I think he's had a little bit less responsibility, frankly. So I look at that matchup. I think that'll dictate a lot of it in terms of like what LSU can do in terms of keeping a lid on this Alabama team. Because really, when they get going, it's being able to run the ball really steadily and then hit big plays off of it. That's a really hard version of Alabama to stop. If you can keep their big plays away, they are still giving you enough negatives to, I think, slow them down to an extent. I don't want to say LSU is just going to like snuff them out or something, but I think they can slow that attack down if they can avoid the big plays and create a couple of negatives.
And how does LSU, and this is where really, like, I don't think this is not a knock on Harold Perkins, one of the more talented players that you see in the country, but I don't think this LSU defense really skipped that much of a beat when Harold Perkins went down. This is one of those games where historically Harold Perkins would be spying a guy like Jalen Milroe and having a lot of success doing it. How does this LSU defense deal with Jalen Milroe getting outside the pocket, extending plays? That's kind of to be determined. We'll see how Blake Baker decides to attack that. Flipping the sides here, we all know the struggles of this Alabama offense. I think it starts with LSU taking advantage of plays down the field. You look at Tennessee, it felt like Nico had throws there to really hit some explosives, didn't really make them. Garrett Nussmeier against Texas A&M was only 2 of 11, 20-plus yards down the field. This is an LSU offense that wants to push the ball down the field, especially with Hilton coming back. You got a young Alabama secondary that will still give you opportunities to hit big plays. This game or this matchup between this LSU offense and this Alabama defense seems to me it's going to come down to, can Garrett Nussmeier, make those throws when they're there Saturday night in Tiger Stadium?
No, honestly, to me, I think you read those stats off from the A&M game. A lot of that was, frankly, because A&M's defensive line was able to be much more disruptive than really any defensive line. Maybe Ole Miss was kind of close to what A&M was able to do. But aside from that, Nussmeier has been really clean. We know this is a great offensive line. Again, you still probably would like to see the right side of that play a little bit better. I don't think they were particularly great against A&M, and frankly, they had their struggles in some of the weeks before. But I just look, Alabama's defensive line's been so disappointing. I think you talk about, like, again, the secondary takes their beating and they kind of get blamed for all the Alabama issues on defense. This defensive line, they just don't get a ton of pressure from their front four. So that's something I'm looking for. When Nussmeier's clean, he's been so nails this year. They do a really good job pushing the ball down the field. And when they get their shots, they're hitting them. I think a lot of this will be at like Alabama. I feel like there's enough talent in that room. Quindarius Robinson's kind of been the only guy I've looked at and said, oh, he's playing at a really high level. Some of those other guys just got to step up.
I think LT Overton's been playing some really good football too. I think there's been guys that I think you're maybe being a little bit harsh on the Alabama defensive line. I think we're used to seeing guys like Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. You don't have that kind of guy, which was a question we had for Alabama heading into the season. I do think that it's probably advantage LSU in pass protection, especially at home. Like this, you talk about the difference between this game being played in Tuscaloosa and Baton Rouge. Like it's a
Yeah.
massive difference, a massive advantage for LSU. Dill, how about this? Try this on for size here. Can LSU find a little bit more balance on offense? Look, I get you have Garrett Nussmeier. You have a ton of really good wide receivers. Your offensive line is absolute nails in pass protection. Didn't it feel like when they went on the road to Texas A&M, they just had a little too much on Garrett Nussmeier's plate and didn't stick to the run game enough? And at a certain point, when you lose that much balance, defenses are just pinning the ears back and getting after the quarterback, not even respecting what you can do run the football. Look, I get you want to air it out. And I'm not saying you should run the football 70% of the snaps, but keeping a defense a little bit more honest with the run game, which I think can be pretty damn good with this offensive line and Caden Durham, the way he's running the football, wouldn't mind seeing LSU come out of the bye week. And I'm not saying stick to the run game, but find a little bit more balance on the offensive side of the football in this football game Saturday night.
It's legit stunned me that LSU can't get this ground game going again. You look at how
It's not
good
that
that
they can't, they're just refusing to do it, which is equally
so for
stupid.
whatever reason, they're not doing like you kind of said it, like whether it's chicken or the egg, whatever. I don't get why they aren't doing it. Again, I know that offensive line is good enough. You certainly see them play at that sort of level. And you are right. I mean, when you go play those elite defensive lines, if you have no balance, I don't care how good you are at that offensive line spot, you're probably going to give up a little more pressure than you need to. So, again, I think LSU can probably be fine being a little bit unbalanced against this Alabama team. But I feel like you make your margin for error a little bit slimmer because, again, if Alabama can come after them, like I still think there's enough talent on that defensive line for them to be more impactful, let's say, than what they've been so far this year.
Yeah, I would like to. I think that's the best version of LSU is just being a little bit more balanced. And I don't think you can ask as much of Garrett Nussmeier as you did of Jaden Daniels last year. And I feel like that's what they're kind of doing. Let's get into the pick here, Dilla. Fascinating. With 2.5-point spread, I'm gonna throw the spread out the
Just
window.
give me the over for me because I personally don't see how either of these teams stop each other consistently. But in all seriousness, I'm probably leaning LSU. I feel like their consistency's been a little bit higher, and you've seen Alabama's ceiling be about as high as anyone's in the country. I
Yeah,
mean,
we
that
have.
first half against Georgia, that's as good of a football as I've seen in college football so far this year. I just look like I don't think their consistency is good enough. I really think they're going to have trouble slowing this passing attack down. And I don't know if they can make enough plays. And on the other side, I think LSU can make a couple negative plays. Like they're still going to give up a lot of yards, I think, in fair amount of points. I think they can, or Alabama will give them enough on offense, give them enough mistakes to make something happen.
You made a good point. Like, what version of Alabama are you getting in this football game is probably the question you're asking. Do you think it's going to be the best version of Alabama on the road at Tiger Stadium night game? I don't think so. LSU doesn't lose these kind of games. They'll lose them to Bama sometimes, but they don't lose a lot of these football games. Give me LSU at night. I kind of have a personal rule. Like I don't bet against LSU at night, at home. Ain't going to do it right now, especially given like how you've seen Alabama play the last couple of weeks. Now they played very, very well against Missouri. I think Missouri is a very, very bad football team. So give me LSU at home as well. Again, let it fly in the comment section. A lot of different ways you can look at this football game. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.